Hi, and welcome to the June 1st Ampleforth office hours. We're going to dig right in this week. We've got a packed agenda and what should be a very fun and lively AMA with the core team to follow. So in terms of what's happening in the Ampleverse this week, really it's all about Spot. We've been discussing this a lot, but very excited about a lot of the progress that's happening here. A couple of updates to share with this group. First and foremost, the Spot security audit is officially underway. We have engaged a third party and are very happy with the results so far. So more to come on that front very soon. Additionally, the core engineering team that is working on Spot had a very successful and bunkered down offsite last week to work through the nuances of the protocol and again, really positive developments. And I think going to be something that is going to be very well received by this community. So stay tuned for more, but want to share that there's a lot of exciting progress happening there. On the marketing side, we are also going to be launching a new Spot-focused digital channel next week. We're keeping it decidedly ambiguous right now just to build a bit more suspense, though certainly with this community we can share. We're going to be focused initially on Twitter, Instagram, and also TikTok to really expand the awareness funnel for not only Spot, but Ampleforth. Given the mechanics of Spot and how it works relative to Ample, it's going to be a great way to introduce a lot of new people to this project. So a lot of exciting work to unveil there next week. And one final update before we jump into the AMA with the team. For those of you who have not yet seen this update from Evan's Twitter feed, retweeted from a small unknown company called Coinbase earlier, very, very excited to see the progress with WAMPL and the fact that we do expect to see it much more broadly available in the very near term. So stay tuned, but really positive and exciting development for the community. And with that, we will open up the floor. Please ask us anything.
All right, that's it. Unless Evan or Brandon have anything to chime in on, generally or broadly in response to that kickoff, I think we can jump right into questions. I'll start monitoring the chat. I see one, which I thought we answered, but other than that, if you have a question, raise your hand and you can take precedence. Otherwise, we'll just sort of read off what gets typed up in the text Discord. Who is Nick though? And yeah, who is Nick? Nick does a better job of introducing Nick, and maybe Brandon does a better job, but Nick's a really great engineer. He's a core contributor now as well. He came over and joined us from Google. He gave an intro on himself and his background a few of these sessions back. He's been a really great addition. He's great to work with. So it would be great if I could dig up his intro for you guys, or he can hop on anytime. Maybe he can join one of the future sessions here.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good intro. Maybe we can get Nick back to talk this part of this as well.
I think so. I think he does. He is. Yeah, he can join for sure. I should have tipped him off, but we'll give him next time. It'd be no problem. I think you guys really like him, and he's definitely busy with you guys on the end side of things. So that's great.
For sure. Yeah. Right now, his primary focus is on the front end requirements for Spot,
which are pretty key because not a lot of people are gonna. Well, who knows who's gonna interact with it in which ways? But I think that front end is gonna be pretty key.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about because most people who use DAI, for example, or Tether is the extreme case. Most people who use Tether never interact with the Tether organization, like converting dollars to other tokens and stuff. But it does serve a very important role, I think, for Spot to. It does a really good job, or will do a really good job of explaining the system and showing how it's operating. So I think it has a lot of potential.
That's right. All right, I think we'll hop into the questions then. So yeah, I'll ping Nick about that in the future. So we had a question. Well, I got to skip BT's question. But we've got the next one from Carpe Diem. Any updates from Balancer on the boosted pools?
I don't have any knowledge that no one else does that's available on forums. So the contracts have been ready to go for a long time. It was just very minor modifications that were needed to do the slight conversion between AMPL and wrapped AMPL under the hood. Aside from that, they're doing all of the front end necessary to integrate the boosted pools into their application. I don't think there's anything special necessary for the AMPL boosted pools at all. And so I expect it will go out when the other ones do. But I think that's up to balance here.
Cool. Anything else you want to chat about with the boosted pools? Because basically we used to talk about them when all this work began a bit. And then obviously a lot of work was done and it took a little bit of time and we're a little bit closer to launch. Or do you want to save that for another session when they're live?
Yeah, I mean, everything about boosted pools are open. So there's nothing really special there. I'm excited because it has the chance to tie together different pieces of the ecosystem. Aave, AMPL markets, wrapped AMPL because it uses that underneath the hood, and then also just providing more utility for AMPL holders. Like if you're an LP, then you can not only get trading fees from trading, but also potentially the interest or the exposure the same way you would from the AMPL market on Aave. So I'm excited for all that to be unleashed and also available through aggregators like 1inch.
Nice. We had a question from Merkle Plant. Will there be a bug bounty for the spot code base?
Good question. We haven't talked about that specifically, but it's something that we should think about at time.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, I think it would probably make sense to though.
Yeah, maybe a touch early right now, but BT by Truth asked question: a spot focused digital channel equals YouTube? No, but that's Matt's department. We should have Matt join us. He couldn't join today, but I think we can have him join in a future session and kind of talk about all the things that are going to go live. And you'll also see some of the things that are going live. One thing we mentioned in the past was Spot might be a little bit more accessible just based on its behavior and hopefully its ubiquity in the space. So it could be a really nice on-ramp. I know we've mentioned that before. When you think about Spot and how it should behave compared to AMPL and how it should behave, and just the idea of AMPL being a unit of account versus what we will be able to use Spot for, the hope is that you don't need a ton of domain expertise to understand what's happening with Spot. And Matt's really running with that, and we're ramping up on that front. So we're quite hopeful that the efforts behind Spot can be ones that really grow a lot of awareness and bring a lot of new folks into the community. A side comment on that, I'm incredibly impressed with all the discussion in Discords and in the governance channel as well. It's just extremely high tier and high quality. So it's been really refreshing to hop in here, especially when a lot of the rest of the crypto space might be in meltdown and panic mode. And we can hop into our Discord and see really high tier, high quality convo. It's really nice. Pronup asked, given the UST collapse, USDC has now become the gold standard of stablecoins. How can Spot compete against USDC and gain market share? Also, how do you gain the trust of those that are now scarred from UST? I think that's a really good question for Evan. Evan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really, really good question. So I would say that USD and USDT have always been the gold standard of stablecoins, not so much UST. I would say UST captured the attention of the broader crypto Twitter community over the course of the last year or so because of how rapidly it was growing and basically what Luna gains look like. So really before stablecoins were a thing, right? There was this little paper called the Peer-to-Peer Digital Cash written by Satoshi Nakamoto that promised us a decentralized money for the internet. And really, Brandon and I, we kind of started working on this project, Ampleforth, and before that it was called Fragments, before all this stablecoin stuff, with the goal of answering the Bitcoin problem, right? It just wasn't stable enough. It was too volatile to be used as a unit of account, and also too volatile to be used as a store of value, and therefore too volatile to be used as a peer-to-peer digital cash. And from our perspective, this is just one problem that we've been working on since the beginning. How do we produce a decentralized and fault-tolerant refuge from volatility? And then that's really what Spot is. I think that, the people who are out there talking about the holy grail of crypto, right, the solution to the peer-to-peer digital cash problem, they're really talking about a different thing than what most people are talking about when they talk about stablecoins, right? So USDC and USDT are perfectly good solutions to the stablecoin problem, so to speak, as long as you don't really care about centralization risk. Right? And so, Bitcoin wasn't going to get the job done, and so somebody patched together Tether, and now you have a refuge from near-term volatility. The only problem with it is that ultimately that refuge is US dollars, and that kind of defeats the ideological purpose of creating a peer-to-peer digital cash. So the solution to the Bitcoin problem is something, that isn't centralized, right? And that is kind of reliable, right? And ubiquitous. And I think that's what UST was positioning itself as, right? So kind of like this decentralized cash, decentralized money that could be useful for all the things that most people commonly think of when they think of money. In terms of gaining trust, right? So UST was kind of a crazy idea, right? Just from the beginning, that protocol was dangerous. Everyone who saw it knew it was dangerous. And then somehow in this bull market, we started to all believe, and when I say we, I don't really mean me, I didn't believe this, but the broader crypto community kind of started to believe that all that really mattered across the board for all of these coins was essentially narrative and market making. It was true for meme coins, it was true, might as well be true for UST. But we kind of, in our organization, I think, don't agree with that. I think my personal take is that 95% of the time it is just about storytelling and market making. 5% of the time you're actually building a financial product, and it actually needs to work, kind of like building a bridge. It needs to transport cars from A to B safely. And that needs to be done really carefully. And the people doing that really need to resist the populism of, strict market making and storytelling in a bull market. But I think the real angle here that can help elucidate the differences between Spot and things like UST is the level of consideration and care that goes specifically into addressing failure scenarios and how the perpetual note degrades under heavy strain, right? This is kind of the centerpiece of our design. In my opinion, it's the reason why, Brandon, jump in if I'm not speaking accurately for you, but it's the reason why we passed on every single algorithmic stablecoin design and stablecoin design that we've seen in the last 4 years, and every single design that we read about since 2015, because we were never happy with the degradation scenario. And I think that this is not going to be a side note or an appendix about Soros attacks in our literature here. It will be pretty evident that this kind of notion of responsible durability, safe failure scenarios, continuous gradual degradation. We've said this before, Spot kind of just, in the worst case scenario, degrades into WAMPL. That is the design, that is the system. And it's also not a stable coin. It's not something, it's a perpetual note whose price will be whatever the market views the value of the collateral set to be. It abstracts supply changes from holders, so you won't really see a lot of positive or negative rebases here. But it's not the type of asset for which a price deviation would signal a crisis of confidence. And it's really quite different. So I'm really excited to kind of, write a little bit more about this and share more about this with the rest of you. But I'm hoping that the market and the community is also willing to listen to a more responsible design. Let's pause there.
Yeah. Evan, I think you have, and then some in the community have spotted a few folks in the space starting to rethink the framing. much like you just outlined, like how do we address the problems? What are the problems? Redefining those more accurately. And then what are the most important considerations? So I think that's
totally. I mean, Vitalik's blog post, he had 2 thought experiments that he mentioned, which I kind of agree with as a starting point, at least, for people who are currently in the crypto space and who don't have any additional kind of background in finance or history. It's a step forward to ask these questions, like what would happen if the price target were kind of inflating by 20% every year, right? And it's like, oh, well, how would the collateral side keep up? It just brings all these interesting questions into place. And like, can it survive a collapse? I'm trying to look up the blog post right now. But I really think even one of the biggest thought leaders in our space, Vitalik, is starting to reframe, this whole stablecoin and stablecoin adjacent problem space in that way. So literally, he says, 1, can the stablecoin, even in theory, safely wind down to 0 users? So what happens when demand dries up? Can that safely happen? And the answer to that question in the case of spot will be yes. And thought experiment 2, what happens if you try to peg the stablecoin to an index that goes up 20% per year? Right? I mean, that's a really good question, because it strikes at the core of like, okay, what are we even doing here? And I mean, even from, I almost cringe every time a journalist asks me like why AMPL was price targeting the CPI adjusted dollar. And it's kind of sad, because I think they're trying to tee us up and say like, is this some sort of prescience? Did you guys know that inflation was coming? And the answer is no. We just knew that there was a point to crypto, and that was to kind of be a politically independent money, right? That could function as, what is the point of commodity money? It's to function as a check against inflation and boom bust cycles. So if you kind of are price targeting a sovereign currency, then, that really cuts the legs out from underneath it. And so I'm a fan of where the community is generally being pushed to think. And hopefully it's not just going to be about people out there telling, a naive market what they want to hear, rather than, building something that's worthwhile in the long run.
right. And it does feel like some folks are starting to ask some of the questions that you guys have been pondering for a long time. So always good to see. We have a question, which is, will there be a stablecoin crackdown by the US government? And is AMPL spot WAMPL vulnerable to this? Do either or both you guys have a take on that?
My first take is that neither AMPL nor spot are actually stablecoins. So I've really been trying to kind of communicate this as succinctly as possible. And I think I really got it down to one short statement here, which is that AMPL is not a stablecoin because it doesn't remove volatility. Period. It's not a spin. This is not about positioning. This is not about kind of, throwing people for a loop so that they don't see us in a specific light. It's just not that. AMPL does not eliminate volatility. It just moves volatility from price to supply. It's not a stablecoin. Stablecoins are refuges from volatility. And spot also isn't a stablecoin. It's a derivative, right? So it's a perpetual note. It's a perp that wraps an ever rotating, almost conveyor belt of tranches, right? So of AMPL derivatives. So all it's doing is taking a bunch of AMPL, freshly tranching it, and rotating that. And the perp is redeemable for that rotating asset pool. And the perp will have a price that's determined by the market, and the perp will in no way react to AMPL's price overtly. There's no target. The supply policies are completely unrelated. It's just, it's a different thing. But I really can't speak for regulators because I'm not one.
That's right. Brandon, did you have any thoughts on either of those two last questions?
Oh, Evan's said so much already. I can't really add that much more aside from just color here on the edges. But going back to the design of Spot and why it's not really a stable coin is, yeah, I mean, it's non-reflexive. It doesn't consume price information from anything. In fact, it doesn't even have an oracle, right? There's no feedback loop in there. It's just a representation of something that's already in the marketplace. And so I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, everything that Evan said, I'm pretty much 100% in agreement with. I kind of wish that we collectively as the community could retire the term stablecoin just completely, because like a zero risk stablecoin just isn't really possible. And the word stablecoin, I think, imparts a lot of expectations from the users that don't really hold. So unless we're talking about like fiat collateralized stablecoins like Tether or USDC, I actually prefer to stay away from that stablecoin term if at all, if we can.
Yeah, I agree. I think if we could go back in time, like Evan said, doing a few different things would make a lot of sense. The way you articulated that, Evan, as far as not a stable coin doesn't remove volatility, yeah, that would have been nice to say maybe 2 years ago, because people see what at least how Ample works, and they see a target, which is another thing I'd like to change. I almost would like people to not think about the target and maybe instead think about the range, because when they have one target, it kind of frames their mind to compare it to those things that are trying to be stable coins. So yeah, I think that's a great way you said that.
It's unfortunate that there aren't really assets out there with a price target that aren't stable coins,
right?
In Ample. But just think about it very simply. Like, stable coins protect people from volatility. They either do that by being redeemable for sovereign assets, right? Or by somehow transferring, the volatility of demand into future risk, something like that, right? Ample doesn't do that. It doesn't remove any volatility.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to this coin too. Just saying that Ample is not a stable coin is sort of a negative statement. But I think one thing that we should also be talking about is the positive side of that, which is, what do we get for that, right? And so Manny has said before that you can't just remove volatility from a system, right? You can transfer it into something else, right? And that means someone taking on extra risk. And so if someone's taking risk, that means that you have to compensate them for holding that risk somehow, right? So in the case of coupon coins, like, you buy deflation today with more inflation tomorrow. That's sort of how you buy it, right? And there's some other models that buy it in different ways. But in Ample's case, since we don't try to remove any volatility, we don't transfer it into risk that someone has to hold, that we don't have to compensate that risk, which means that Ample can be purely non-dilutive and also just sort of very, very durable, right? And so that kind of goes along with it. It's the unit of account, and it's durable, and it's non-dilutive. I think all of those combine to make, they fit together like puzzle pieces, and that's what makes Ample Ample.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to say Ample's a durable unit of account, or it's a decentralized unit of account. There's just so much noise that I can say that, and if the person I'm speaking to really doesn't know what a unit of account is and doesn't care to learn what that is, they'll just accidentally, when they try to repeat what it is, say it's like a stablecoin. And that's just not very helpful. I wish we had a more, I guess, catchy word that people could gravitate towards and understand. So if you guys have any ideas, I'm all ears.
There's a few questions about marketing, by the way, and this is sort of the way some things can work often. To Evan's point there, giving the information, making sure that all the components are well researched, well put together, and the baseline of things. Just think of like the white paper or the red book, and some of the things, at least around Spot, that are being worked on, from technical docs to the white paper on that as well. That can be released into the world, and at the end of the day, it's really up to the world to pick the language it wants on how to describe these things. But starting in the right direction is really important. And I think, just to blanket answer some of these marketing things, that's a place where a lot of the business side of things are spending their time. Folks like Matt and others are thinking about how is this best presented to the world. In hindsight's always 2020. Like, going back into the world with Ample, seeing what's happened, it is a very new and innovative AMPL is just extremely new and innovative, which is difficult to explain. But having some of those lessons under the belt and taking something like Spot out into the world, we're hopeful that, yes, the framing will be correct. And then the speech from you guys in the community and the ideas from you guys in the community are really helpful. Because at the end of the day, it's the world that's going to be speaking about this thing.
Yeah, one bright spot of the recent activity or behavior in the space is I think people are much more open to these ideas and asking more questions than they used to. Since so much of the conversations around digital currencies happen on social media channels, I saw some tweet that really resonated with me, and it's from Naomi actually, but they basically said that dogmatism scales and nuance doesn't, right? So in a bull market, I think that's absolutely the case, and it's magnified also by social media. But now, since we've had such high-profile events like what happened with Terra and Luna, people are starting to ask the questions and digging more into nuance, and so I think that sort of helps the space in general, right? So ideally, there's also that famous quote where like it's taken a few different forms, but like America will eventually do the right thing after trying every other alternative. I think to a certain degree, DeFi might be following similar pathways, but hopefully if DeFi makes a mistake, it only makes that mistake once rather than multiple times. And so eventually, hopefully we'll end up in the right place.
I'd be surprised. I mean, I hope that's the case, but if we can just somehow remember the mistake of UST for like a 10-year period, I think progress could be made. I mean, because we're already recreating mistakes from history, right? So, yeah, it's also like what Galois Capital was saying, accelerationism. Like, the community has to just learn every lesson the hard way, but hopefully you can hold on to the memory of those lessons for a few years, ideally a decade, before history repeats itself again.
Right. And not everyone thinks the same way, so this can't be a blanket statement. But one could imagine that the longer one spends in the crypto space, the higher a priority of something like durability comes to them. Like if someone got into crypto in 2010 and they were still here today with the projects that they picked and supported, you would imagine if they had that long of a run in the space, they would want whatever things they put their support behind to be in fact durable. And there are lots of projects in the space doing lots of things. Some of them are wise, some of them are unwise, some of them have been tried in finance, not just, but not in crypto yet. So they try them here. But ultimately, if they're not durable, what can be expected of them? And so many in the stablecoin space or want to fulfill stablecoin-like use cases. If they're not durable, like what good are they? And then there are some latent durability questions. Like there's some questions here about something like USDC or USDT. Sure, they're durable for now, but there's different things that might make them not so durable in the future. So you asking the right questions and focusing on all these different things is pretty important. There's a lot of questions actually, and we don't have a ton of time, so I'll try to pick some of the best ones out of here. Proneup asked, off the top of your head, what are attack vectors that Spot is vulnerable to? Do you guys have any takes on that?
I would say that it doesn't totally explode as a result of, let's just say a huge cell attack. It's not like UST where it's like, okay, after a certain threshold, there's this crazy hyperinflation. And it's not like USDT where like if you depegged for, 30 cents and had gone on for 2 weeks, then, that would imply that there's a serious crisis of confidence behind, the liquidity of the assets that back it. So can it break kind of gracefully though, not in a way that's unconsidered. I'd also add the standard technical vectors that every new system is built on smart contracts. But we take security very seriously, and we have, I think, pretty good development processes in place. to mitigate that as best we can.
Yeah.
Also, Spot has no Oracle.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's one detail too that might not get noticed unless it's pointed out, is how the entire system sort of encapsulates and protects against Oracle risk very, very well. Right. So in the case of Spot, there's pretty much just one Oracle. It's the AMPL Oracle. It only reads one value per day. If the Oracle is denied service, then the system can deal with that. Right. So if there's no rebase for a day, that's fine. That's sort of by design. And so this is very different from systems that rely on like Spot market price data. I think it's very, very resilient architecturally.
Right. I would say also, just looking at what's been built in the AMPL ecosystem, durability is one of those pillars and things that have been really focused on. And then on this component, keeping things very simple. You guys have talked about that so many times. And yes, certainly without domain knowledge, some of these ideas and how they can be used might seem complex. But when it comes to the components, AMPL itself is really simple. Spot is simple. Removing the Oracle component, it's another simple add that helps keep it safe in a lot of ways. And then you can compare that to some other projects out there where maybe simplicity is not quite the priority. Merkle Plant asked, where's the red book? Is it now totally gone? It's not totally gone yet. GS Wayback Machine, you're right about that. Olive London just linked that to me the other day. I think it might find a home in some of the docs in the future, but if you guys noticed all the website changes that we made and updates there, it just wasn't ported yet. There was a question I'm trying to dig up. It was about the price of Spot. Oh yeah, Camp 55 asked, how does Spot gains in price or gain its price? Are you asking about, because it's not a stable coin, how it might behave? Or I think you asked that question around the time when Evan was discussing the design and some of the questions behind it. And because it's not stable, it can vary in price. Are you asking how it, I guess, could you add any clarification to that question? We can try to answer it.
I think we can talk a little bit more about how Spot might theoretically after the initial docs are out.
Yeah.
That way everybody understands what's going on here. But yeah, Spot is just a claim on an ever rotating set of senior tranches. And the price of Spot will largely be determined by how the market views the value of the assets that Spot is redeemable for.
Right. I'm not seeing a ton of new questions. I think it's a pretty good session, and obviously there's a lot to do on the Spot front. So I see Kent typing. I will maybe try to answer that, but after that, I think we'll wrap it up. And Carpe asks, when someone mints Spot, they get a Spot token and a Z tranche, right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. All right, thanks, Kent. And then, yeah, Merkle Plant, if you got a question, we'll answer it. And then I think otherwise we'll wrap it up. Cool. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. Evan and Brandon, thanks for the great insights. Let's have another great week, and next week will be text-based office hours. Take it easy, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.